Do I have a disorder?
In my head.
Hello everybody, welcome to In My Head. Two quick things. The first, I'm from the United States of America, so if you're from a different country or a different culture, the things that I say here, they may not apply the same for you. The second, I am not a licensed professional. Here on In My Head, I give my take on mental health issues, and today we're going to talk about how personality traits become personality disorders. What I'm going to be talking about is what's known as trait theory. Trait theory is a specific way to look at personality disorders. It's kind of like you're looking through a lens and seeing things through this particular perspective. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about the way that we pathologize personality, and that is through the DSM-5 Section 3 if you have a copy. So the first thing to note is that a personality trait is a pattern. And what does that mean? Well, a pattern is when something gets repeated. Let's take risk-taking for an example. Somebody who is risk-taking may start to take drugs that they know may affect their health. They may do something that they know is dangerous, like drive a car dangerously. They may do something like sleep around with multiple sex partners without protection. So here we have three examples of risk-taking, but does that mean that they have that personality trait of risk-taking? What's important here is how many times, here we have three instances, and in what duration, what length of time have we experienced this pattern? When you look at those two things, when does something become a personality trait? The truth is, we don't have an answer. I want you to think about this in a different way. Think about this in terms of physical illness. When you cough, let's say you cough, you cough, you cough. How many times do you have to cough? And in what length of time do you have to cough before you decide that that cough is a problem? Again, there's no perfect answer here. I like to think of these things sort of like a fog. We kind of know what a fog is. We know when we're inside of a fog, but we don't know exactly where the boundaries are. And it's not even really important that we know exactly where the boundaries are to know that we're in a fog. So a pattern repeated over a certain period of time becomes a personality trait. In the DSM, we have identified 25 different maladaptive personality traits. Maladaptive means that they're problematic, they're not so great to have. Generally, these are the kinds of patterns that interrupt the way that people function in the world. The personality disorders that you're already familiar with under this model have been condensed down into 6 personality disorders. And these personality disorders have been mapped to many of these traits. But just as we saw when we defined what a personality trait is, how many times does somebody have to show a personality trait for it to become a disorder? Think of that image of the fog again. We don't need to know exactly where the boundaries are to know that there's a fog. Let's take a look at the 2 traits that make up narcissistic personality disorder. We have attention-seeking and we have grandiosity. You could think of having each of these traits as being on a slider. Sometimes we show them more often, sometimes we show them less often. Wherever we are on this slider is what we call severity. And just like when we were defining what a personality trait is, when we're looking to see if somebody has a personality disorder, they have to have a high severity. It has to be happening often. So for somebody to have narcissistic personality disorder, they have to have a higher severity in attention-seeking, and they have to have a higher severity in grandiosity. Now, as you may have guessed, everybody has some degree of all of these traits, myself included. And these personality traits can change over time for all kinds of different reasons. For example, let's say that you're somebody who was just attacked by an animal. And let's take the trait of emotional lability, which is basically how emotional you get, how all over the place you feel. Since you were just attacked by an animal, your emotional lability probably is going to go up. However, as some time passes, and maybe some days or weeks go on from the time that you were attacked, that emotional ability will start to go down as you cope. Let's look at another example. Let's say you just went through a really bad breakup. Since you might be feeling a little bit raw, a little bit vulnerable, intimacy avoidance might start to rise. You might not be so comfortable being close to people right now. But as time goes on and you grieve the end of the relationship, as you start to get closer to other people like friends and family, you start to get out there a little bit more into the public, that intimacy avoidance may start to go back down. So you can see how personality traits can go up and down, and depending on our situation, if they align in the right amount and the right time, they could become a personality disorder. But you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, but everybody copes, so why do people get stuck with these traits? Why do they have personality disorders that persist over time? Well, here's something that I want you to think about. What if you're somebody who is in an ongoing stressful situation? Maybe you're living in a war zone. Maybe you have another mental illness that will not go away. And what if you know how to use these personality traits as a way to try to cope with the stressful situation, but you don't know other ways to cope? If that's true for you, some of these traits may get stuck at high severity, and they may not go back down. Alright, so let's talk about coping. We call these the 25 maladaptive personality traits, but each of them is theorized to have an adaptive side as well. So if we take the trait of anxiousness, you might think of it as having an adaptive side of being calm. Here's the thing though, anxiousness can actually be adaptive. For example, if you're smelling smoke, being anxious in that situation might be appropriate and helpful and adaptive to keep you alert to what's going on around you. And at the same time, while we might think of being calm as being adaptive generally, in that situation, it's probably not so great to stay calm. When there's signs of danger around you, it's appropriate to feel a little bit anxious. What I really want to communicate here is that all of these behaviors, all of these personality traits are normal. Even traits that we might normally think of as bad, like callousness or hostility, those can be appropriate in situations where somebody's threatening to harm us. Being callous or being hostile may actually be adaptive and help us to cope with that situation. So if everything is relative, if we don't quite know where the boundaries are on everything, what is a personality disorder? A personality disorder is when these traits get stuck in one position and they are not able to be moved from that position. When our traits get stuck in this one position and we're not flexible to adapt to our circumstance or our environments, that's when we have a personality disorder. This leads to problems with our ability to do work, to socialize, and to cooperate and coordinate with people, and to have healthy and happy intimate relationships. If we want to help people who have personality disorders, there are a few things that we need to do. We have to get them out of perpetually stressful situations. We have to help to motivate them to get them unstuck from these maladaptive ways of coping. And we have to demonstrate for them and teach them that there are alternative ways to coping. Thank you to my patrons who help to make videos like this possible. I use Patreon to help support people doing work that they love, and my patrons help to support me in my mission of humanizing mental health. If you like learning about mental health, head over to youtube.com/RyanLiberty, go hit subscribe. Have I shifted the way that you think about personality traits and personality disorders? I'd love to hear it. Leave that down below in the comments. Thank you for joining me, everybody, here on In My Head.